take up, we're kind of trying to get the events of the life of Jesus as he's on his way to Jerusalem for ultimately his sacrifice. And recall that there's 5 or 6 kind of key transition points in the life and the existence of Jesus, second person of the Godhead. So here's a review question. What are they? All right, well, I should say let's get them in order, but all right, we'll put it baptism, because that is one.
Incarnation.
And wait, so what's the significance of this baptism?
The Godhead was present all at once.
Ordination for
God-
Which is true, however, it's his ordination.
Oh, okay.
It's the transition between his life as a carpenter and he begins his life of ministry, okay. You don't get to play, Shelley.
Because I have them all written down.
Yeah, you've got them all, okay. You're the port of last resort here. Oh, Angela can read them. There we go. Okay,
At the temple.
so what's the first one?
At the temple. Incarnation.
The incarnation. And of course, this is his conception, the incarnation, which is part of that ineffable mystery regarding the hypostatic union. Because this is a significant thing that happens, and you think about this, and even in human terms, we're trying to get your head around this, and of course you can't, because it is a mystery. But that transition from the eternal existence as the second person of the Godhead to where he becomes incarnate in the Virgin Mary, and then he's born. And now he is fully human and he is fully God. The two natures fully present but not mixed, that's there. So you have this transition, which is a pretty significant transition that goes on. It's you know, has the very fabric of reality been altered at this point? And you know, and in certain respects, you have to say, yeah, something is really transitioned here. But okay, so we have his incarnation, then we have his, what comes next?
Temple visit.
The temple visit, which is, how old is he there? 12. And this becomes that point in a boy's life, Jewish boy's life, where whatever education he has is done. Now he apprentices to his father, which is the significance, of course, when Mary finally finds him in the temple 3 days later, you know, and he says, it must be about my father's business. And then he goes home and submits to his parents for his growing up. Okay, then we have his baptism, then we have the Transfiguration. Okay, that moment where he stands at the break between time and eternity, kind of seeing both sides. You have Peter, James, and John on one side. You have Moses and Elijah on the other, and he's standing there, and they witness this. Again, the voice of God is present. So you have his transfiguration. Then you have what?
Resurrection.
Hurry up, Conrad, sit down. Everybody's looking at you guys and they're distracted from the lesson.
Resurrection.
Well, that's true. That tells you how boring I am, but watching you sit down is more entertaining. What's next after the transfiguration?
Resurrection.
The resurrection? Always get this wrong. 1 S or 2? 2, 1 R.
No, it's one. No, 2 R's and 1 S.
2 R's, all right, I get it.
I knew there was 2. Thank you, Barb.
1 S and 2 R's. The resurrection.
There you go.
There we go. If I had notes, I'd be able to do this. Yeah, his resurrection, where now he comes out of the grave in his resurrected body, and then what's last? His return, which will come. Now, of course, we're coming up onto the season where we remember the incarnation. We celebrate the incarnation, you know, we're gonna go through Advent, we're gonna go through all of the things related to Christmas. which is, kind of a highlight. Interestingly enough, the church calendar begins with Advent. So in a couple of weeks, I will be able to stand up and say Happy New Year. And you'll look at me strange and say, what calendar are you using? But the church has preparation in Christian life to celebrate the incarnation, because this is a big deal. But it is still this that becomes the focal point of all history. So while this is Christmas, this is Easter. And this becomes the focal point of all of human existence and all of human history. Everything prior to is leading up to the resurrection. This becomes the culmination of everything that's gone before. And everything since, we look back to the resurrection. And in eternity future, it will be the resurrection that will be the focal point of everything. It's this is the central point, not this. Which then raises that question, how much emphasis do we give to this as opposed to this in the Christian walk and Christian life? But these become the significant transition points where Jesus, in Jesus' existence in his life. Now, we back to the map. Now, where we've been, Jesus was ministering up in Galilee, in this area, with his disciples. Had at various times sent his disciples out 2 by 2. Now he's headed down to Jerusalem ultimately for his passion. He comes to the border of Samaria, wants to spend the night in Samaria. They say no, out, we don't want you here. And so that is the rejection by the Samaritans. He is rejected. So he crosses the Jordan River, comes down the east side of the Jordan River, comes back over, crosses, and he visits Jericho, where several significant things happen. Not the least of which is his encounter with Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus' life is transformed. And that happens right after his encounter somewhere up in here with the rich young ruler, who comes to him and says, what must I do to be saved? And they have the whole dialogue, keep the law, I've done that, good, sell everything you got, give it to the poor, and come and follow me. The rich young ruler doesn't do that, goes away very sad because he was rich. Jesus issues warnings against and talks about the difficulty of rich people entering the kingdom of heaven because of the appeal here. And yet it's contrasted with Zacchaeus, who is rich, and yet he is transformed. So it's not hopeless, in other words. Jesus says with God all things are possible. And then Zacchaeus serves as this example of the relationship between faith and works. He encounters Jesus. His life is transformed. Consequently, that follows through on how his life is. He gives away half, promises to give away half of everything he owns, and also to repay anybody he's defrauded, which is pretty significant when you look at it all. And you see the transforming power and then the relationship between grace and faith. He accepts the grace of God. He has faith. And then it comes out in his works. It comes out in his behavior. He is now living differently. He's not saved because he gives everything away. He gives everything away as evidence that now his heart has been tremendously transformed. And so he visits with Zacchaeus. On his way into Jericho, he heals a blind man. On the way out of Jericho the next day, he heals two blind men. So there's, as one person has said, there's 4 blind people that are healed at Jericho. And all of that goes on. Now, this becomes a little bit of a tricky point, depending on which scholar you read and historian, which harmony of the Gospels you're using. The debate is now, at this point, does Jesus go to Jerusalem, or where does he go? And I think the best arguments that can be made, he's around Jerusalem, or he's around Jericho, and it seems as if he stays around Jericho, this cursed site. He stays around Jericho, and he's somewhere around Jericho when the events of John chapter 11 then come into play. And John chapter 11 is the account of Lazarus. So you remember this story. We can read it here. John chapter 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness is not unto death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place that he was. Now the question is, where was he? Well, John doesn't tell us. But the surmise seems to be he's hanging around Jericho up here. Bethany down just outside of Jerusalem. So it's not a real far walk, but he waits 2 days. Now he got the message. Said, Mary and Martha send him the message, look, Lazarus is sick. Implying what?
Come heal him.
Come and do something about this. I mean, this is serious. I mean, this is not like the sniffles. He's seriously ill. Okay, so their request is, they send the word he's ill, but what they're really saying is, Lord, come and do something about this. That seems to be implicit in the message. We got this crisis. We are asking you to come and do something about this. And what does Jesus do? Hangs out for 2 more days. Kind of an odd thing, isn't it? I mean, start with, it says explicitly, John says explicitly, you love Mary, you love Martha, and you love Lazarus. So this is somebody that it's not just a general acquaintance. This is somebody, for whatever historical reasons, Jesus is close to. He's close to this family because he stays there with them. He comes and goes from their place. So this is somebody he has special affection and feeling for. Not just some vague request from somebody he's never met. And so they send him word. They do the right thing. Get word to the Savior, the Messiah. He's sick. This is serious. Please come. And Jesus doesn't come. Have you ever found yourself in a very dire situation where you prayed with as much passion and intensity as you are able to muster that God will intervene, and then he does nothing? 4 of you. Okay, good. Well, I'm talking to you 4. Well, of course, I think every genuine Christian has been in that situation. So why doesn't Jesus just pick up and go? He's going to go there anyway. Why doesn't he go? Yes, ma'am.
Well, in verse 4 it says, the sickness is not in and death, no, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. So that's why he didn't go, he waited.
Because the delay, now could he have just gone right away and taken care of it?
Yes.
Did he even need to go?
No.
But he does nothing. He waits. Why? To maximize the glory that God will receive. To maximize the glory that God will receive. That's the reason. He says, no, we're going to wait on this. We're going to hold off on this. This isn't going to be an immediate response. And he says, this illness does not lead to death. Well, didn't Lazarus die?
Physically.
Yeah. Well, they were worried about him stinking, and it doesn't sound like he's stinking after a hard day's work. I mean, he's stinking because he's dead, he's putrefied. It's been that long. So Jesus makes this observation, makes this statement, illness doesn't lead to death, it's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Why does God intervene in our difficult situations? for his glory. Now, why do we want God to intervene in our difficult situations? For our comfort, right? Isn't that mostly what I'm hurting and I want to be delivered from this. That, you know, that's usually why we're praying, okay? This is miserable, this really stinks, I don't like it, get me out of this. Which kind of, you know, you could sympathize with Mary and Martha here, you know, hey, their brother is sick. And this is a serious sickness. We don't like it. We want to get out of this situation. That is in essence what they are asking. Come and fix this for us. But Jesus waits. Now, have you ever been in a situation where you are forced to wait upon God and it makes you wonder whether or not he cares?
Yes.
Yeah, that's our usual response. God, why aren't you listening to me? Why aren't you doing this for me? Well, you know, come on, let's get with the program. What do I got to do to get your attention here? Fix this. But God says, wait. Now, why does God then wait? Because what he is going to do ultimately will result in greater glory, greater worship, greater praise than if he acts the way we want him to act in the moment that we want him to act. That becomes a significant point in the Psalms if you read the Psalms on a regular basis. You know, you go through. And what ultimately is the basis of so many of the psalmists' requests? To the glory of your great name. Whatever you're going to do it to maximize the glory given to your name. So anyway, Jesus hangs out for two days. Verse 6, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. So wherever they are, they're not down in the Judean area. There's some question then, where's he hanging out? But anyway, and the disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going to go there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. What in the world does that mean? Now you get what's going on. The Jewish leaders have already expressed their opposition to Jesus. Good reason to suppose that if he goes to Jerusalem, he's going to get stoned. Kind of best case scenario, you know. And they're like, Jesus, stay out of Jerusalem. Don't be going down there. You know, we can't risk what's going on here. And Jesus says, hey, there's 12 hours in a day. There's 12 hours in a day. Anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. What in the world is that reference to? And how does that make any sense whatsoever when they're talking about Lazarus? You ever been mystified by that verse?
Is he talking about daytime? Because there's 24 hours in a day, but this is 12 in the day.
Yeah, so what does that mean? Yeah, right off, does he not understand the cosmic clock here? The one who brought everything into existence. I'm pretty sure he's got the whole,
Like sunshine and
you know,
daytime? Daytime.
so he's talking about daytime.
In my translation, it says, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Not just 12 hours.
So what translation do you have? You don't even know.
New International Version.
Oh, well.
That explains it.
Thank goodness.
Well, which is actually fairly accurate. Yeah, there's 12 hours of daylight. What do you do during daylight?
Your work.
You work. Yeah, that's right. You're out with your grandkids. They're going, what time is it? It's daytime. It's working time. That's all you got to know. When it's dark, we can be done.
Maybe.
Well, whether they
We have
listen,
lights.
then Dad has floodlights, so we don't have to ever quit. We can work 24 hours a day. No, it's the idea that there's a set time to accomplish certain things. Okay? You work when it's light, you sleep when it's dark. That's the principle. And it's the idea that God has established times in order to accomplish certain things. His work is to be done in the time frame that he has allotted. And so Jesus is saying, no, this is all fitting in with the timeline for what has to happen. So after saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he'll recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he was resting in sleep. So Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake, I'm glad I was not there so that you may believe, but let's go see him. So he finally says, okay, you guys are not getting this. Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad he's dead. Ooh. I'm sure there will be people that will say that about me once I shuffle off, but there'll be something completely different by it, you know. Why wouldn't you say, he died? Boy, I'm glad he died. Yeah, doesn't sound very nice, does it? Warren, that doesn't sound nice, does it? No. I won't say that about you when you die.
No.
Oh, I promise. So Thomas, called Didymus, or the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. You know, Thomas is the perennial skeptic. Or my friend that I made reference to a few weeks ago said he identified with Judas. I always identify with Thomas. He's just a skeptic. Going, okay, I don't get this, but hey, it's kind of like resignation. If he's going to do this, well, let's go with him. I mean, he's going to die, we'll die with him. So they go. So when Jesus came, he found Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now this is a significant thing. 4 days. What's the significance of the 4 days? In Jewish belief, there was the idea that the spirit of a departed person hovered around for about 3 days. And there was always the possibility in that 3-day window that they might come back to life. That was the belief. But by the time they were dead 4 days, they were dead. There was no question now. He was dead. He's dead. And so there's no doubt about that, which also means that what happens to people's grief who loved the person who died on the 4th day? It intensifies. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I would imagine most of us have been through this. Somebody close, parent, sibling, whatever, dies, and there's not an immediate response because it takes a little bit for something of that magnitude to actually sink in, that they're gone. And so by the 4th day, grief has reached its kind of pinnacle point for Mary and Martha and for the people that are around there. So, okay. So they go down there. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. He's dead. You know, Lord, if you'd have just shown up a little bit quicker. If you'd have just been here a little quicker. And Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Okay, so Jesus says, don't worry, your brother's gonna be resurrected here. And she thinks he's talking about the final day. Now, how much comfort is that to her?
In that moment, not much.
In that moment, not much is the correct answer. When you stand at the grave of somebody that you loved, and those final words are said, and that body goes in the ground, yes, you can stand there with the hope of the resurrection. Someday I'm going to see him again. I'm going to see her again. Someday. When is someday? Long time, probably. Is that comfort? That's some comfort, but it's not a tremendous comfort in that moment. You know, and that's kind of where Martha is here. And then he says to her, I am the resurrection of the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. And when she said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. So He's just paused. He's hanging out. And the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, and they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to weep. And when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. So she said, if you would have just responded when we sent you the message, this wouldn't have had to happen. If you'd have just come when we asked, if you'd have just answered my first request, I wouldn't be here. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. So he looks at the grieving people, the genuine grief, and he has this intense sympathy and identification with them. Even though what he is going to do is going to be done because it maximizes the glory that God is going to receive, he recognizes still the real struggles that the people are having in the midst of it. Now, of course, you get several places here where there is reference to weeping and crying, including who cries? How many of you, was that the first Bible verse you ever memorized? Jesus wept. You can always do that one in the competitions in Sunday school or Bible school. How many, 2 verses? Jesus wept. Got the first one. Get the easy one out of there. But the word that's used for Jesus weeping and the word that is used for Mary, Martha, and the other Jews weeping is not the same word, actually. So the word that's used to describe the weeping for Mary and Martha and for the other Jews, that is the, it's the hysterical crying out in grief. All right? It is the voice of that deep-seated anguish at the difficulty of the moment. That's the word that's used. They are experiencing grief at its pinnacle at this moment. It's that kind of anguish. But Jesus says, take me to the grave. They go to the grave. Stone was against it. Jesus says, take away the stone. And Martha says, not a good idea. Okay, that's the Message paraphrase. So Martha said, Lord, by this time he stinks because he has been dead for 4 days. So this is the assertion, and they're saying, you gotta wonder, why do they want him to roll the stone away? Does Jesus want to go in and see him one last time? Whatever, and they're like, well, not a good idea. He stinks. He stinks. Don't do that. But Jesus insists, and they do it. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you if you believed you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I said this on account of the people standing around me, that they may believe that you sent me. And previous to this, of course, it says that Jesus wept. Where is it? I should know the passage for that. Verse 35. He weeps. And then other people are around him saying, could not he open the eyes of the blind man, also have kept this man from dying? So there's all this doubt. When the word is used of where Jesus wept, it doesn't mean the same thing as hysterical grief. Reference to an expression of hysterical grief. It's more like angry agitation. Like Jesus stands back and he's like, when you're in and you just get aggravated. And you're angry that this happens this way. That's the word that's used to describe Jesus' reaction to this. He's not standing at the grave of Lazarus weeping because he's lost a friend, which is a lot of times how it gets portrayed. That's not what he's doing. He's standing there with agitation and anger saying, it didn't have to be this way. Not in that moment, but in the broad scope of all of human history. Had sin not entered the world, we wouldn't have this situation. And it's more like his angry agitation at the whole situation, the entire scope. That's what Jesus, when it says Jesus wept, it's that. It's not this expression of grief. And so, when he said these things, he cried with a loud voice saying, Lazarus, come out. Now, why does he have to do it with a loud voice?
So the crowd could hear him.
I didn't think of that. Maybe.
Maybe all the bandages and all the spices, cause it's had to be good wrapped up. Maybe he couldn't.
Because he was deaf.
Lazarus is sleeping very deeply.
Yeah. When one
Maybe he could've
issues a
whispered.
huh?
I believe he could have whispered and Lazarus would have heard him.
Did he have to say anything? This is the voice of authoritative command. He's speaking in the voice of an authoritative command. You ever walk into the room where all the kids are being chaotic and go, hey! And I go, yeah, it works really well.
You do that all the time.
All the time. You hear it all the way at your house when I'm yelling at guys around the mill. Hey! Yeah, I had a guy said to me one time, I said, you need to stop yelling at us. I go, why? You can't hear me as it is. You know? So anyway, so he gives this authoritative, in an authoritative commanding voice, he says, Lazarus, come out. And the man who had died came out. Now this to me, I think, is one of those funny, if you really think about this, it's kind of funny. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, his face wrapped with a cloth, and Jesus said to him, unbind him and let him go. I mean, if he's Lazarus, presumably been treated the way a Jewish person, you know, they would have been wrapped in grave clothes, spices put in, all of that stuff. So he comes alive, you know, and how's he come out? You know, he can't walk. His feet are bound. Jesus said, let him go. I mean, come on, that had to have been kind of funny to see. I mean, stunning, but that moment of humor where it's like, whoa, what happens here? So this happens, I think, just prior to him going down to Jerusalem ultimately for his passion. This is a demonstration of the fact that not only can he heal the blind, not only does he heal the lame, all of those things, not only can he extend salvation to rich people at any walk of life, he has power over life and death. Now, this is not the first time he's raised someone from the dead. But this very clearly is the most dramatic one. And it's interesting to note that this is only recorded in the Gospel of John. There's no other, the other Gospel writers pass over this. They don't make reference, there's reference to Lazarus, but not this situation. Only John has done that. Some of the scholars have wondered why is a miracle of this magnitude only recorded in one of the Gospels? I mean, this is a pretty big deal, wouldn't you think? Yes, correct answer. Yes, this is a pretty big deal. Jerry, had anybody ever get up and walk out of the... You would go home and change your underwear if it happened, right? I would. Absolutely. Whoa, this is a big deal. But it's only recorded in John. Now, why is it only recorded in John? Well, of course, John is there, you know, and he witnesses it. Now, John's is the last of the Gospels written. He writes at the end of his life. And it has been surmised that Lazarus is still alive at the time the other Gospels are written. Mark written first, subsequently Matthew and Luke. And the idea is that, you know, Lazarus would still be alive and known to the Christian community and also the Roman community at that time. And it was out of kind of deference to him that he isn't recorded. I don't know. It's plausible. You know, we won't know the answer to that till we get to eternity future, and then maybe it won't matter. So here it is. Here's this miracle that is seen by Mary, Martha. Lazarus experiences it. At least some of the disciples are there. There's all these Jewish people around. Now, what would you think if out at the cemetery someday, somebody, you know, there's a coffin there, and, you know, you're around, you're doing the committal, and the minister says, pounds on the coffin and says, open up and get out of there. And the guy does. I mean, think about that.
Jerry screwed up.
Sorry, Dre. Warren threw you under the bus on that one. I mean, seriously, what would the response to be of that?
Miracles can happen.
Would you
I think
finally
a lot of
believe?
people.
Yeah, do you find, now, okay, now you pagan relatives, do you get it now? Right? Something on that order. Okay, but what are people's responses to this miracle? This is absolutely stunning. Now keep in mind, what would have happened if Jesus would have come right away and healed him while he was sick? Just another healing. But he delays. He goes, no, I'm going to wait because I want to do something even bigger than just having him get out of his sick bed. I'm going to have him come out of his ultimate sick bed. And brings him out. So look at the response. Many of the Jews, therefore, who'd come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. All right? So if you actually saw a miracle, would you believe it? If you actually genuinely saw a miracle, would you believe it?
Yes. Yep.
That's the correct answer, Sue. I hope so. I hope so. Many of the Jews had come with Mary, seen what he did, believed in him, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Which implies what?
Tattletales.
Yeah, yeah. Gotta run off to the, you know what he did this time?
Fact checking.
Fact checking. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what are we going to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. They witness what is arguably the greatest miracle that Jesus has done up to this point in his ministry. The most dramatic, definitely. And what's their response?
How do we stop?
How do we stop him? We got to do something about this guy. We got to do something about, because if we don't do something about this guy, we're going to lose the whole show. We got to stop it. Do miracles create faith?
Yeah.
They might wake it up.
I mean, have you ever said, man, if I could just see a miracle, then I would believe? And the answer is, not always. In other words, think about something. You watch someone bring a dead person back to life. What would you think about the person that did that? Well, and yet people saw this, and instead they're like, hey, we got to do something about this guy. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees at this point acknowledge this man performs many signs, so they acknowledge that big, dramatic, tremendous things are happening. But if we let him keep doing this, everyone will believe him. The Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. Now this is an interesting thing, but one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, and this is the Caiaphas who in a little bit is going to be trying Jesus. You know nothing at all. Kind of rude, isn't he? Chief priest saying to all the religious leaders, you guys are a bunch of ignoramuses, idiots. That's kind of what it means. Nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. So here's Caiaphas. Now, is Caiaphas a believer? Pretty hard to make the case that he is. He's Jewish. He's the high priest, so he holds the office. He holds the office, but he himself is not a believer. And so he says, come on, guys. Did you get this? It's better for us to get rid of one man than for us to let this go on, so that, because then what's going to happen is the Romans are going to come. They're going to take away our nation, and we're going to lose are positions that we have. What are they most concerned about? Themselves, their position, their authority, their comfort. They're worried about keeping the power that they got. Sound vaguely familiar? That's an editorial comment. Okay. He did not say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but for all those who gather into one, the children of God who are scattered abroad. Now that's an interesting thing. This is recognized that he is actually speaking a prophetic message. But he's not a believer. He holds the office, however. So here's this, in essence, hardened pagan holding the office of high priest, which is the person that is to represent the nation to God. Although he really isn't the person doing that, but he holds the office. And God still moves him to speak a prophetic message. Now, does he know the message is prophetic? Probably not. Because if he really understood what it was he was saying, he wouldn't have done what he did about a week later, or a short time later. So it raises kind of a sideline. I won't run all the way down this rabbit trail, but the relationship between the person and the office. Is there authority within the office that a person has because they hold the office? In this case, it certainly seems to be yes. So Caiaphas gives this prophetic message, not knowing that he's giving a prophetic message. So he does it. He didn't say this of his own accord, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation. Okay. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. So this is the seminal event where they realize Jesus is there. The nation realizes he's there. They're dealing with the difficulties. We got to do something about this guy because he's a threat to us. Because if what he's saying is true, and if we let this go on and on, we're going to lose our slot here. We're going to lose our place. We got to get rid of this guy. And now they have made a decisive decision to put him to death. Somehow, one way or another, we got to get rid of this guy. So they're perfectly willing to stoop, in essence, to murder. Well, not in essence. Yeah, it is murder. In order to keep their own positions. Therefore, Jesus no longer walked openly among the Jews, but went for there to a region near the wilderness to a town called Ephraim, and there he stayed with the disciples. So where did he go? So he's probably somewhere around Jerusalem, gets the message, Lazarus is dead, hangs out here a couple more days, goes down to Bethany, raises Lazarus from the dead. All of the brouhaha that then follows, he realizes that the opposition to him is hardening, and so he withdraws, it says, to Ephraim. Now, historically, Old Testament Ephraim was up here on the border with Samaria and Judea. So it's an isolated area. It's kind of a no man's land now between Samaria and Judea, and the antipathy between the Jews down here and the Samaritans up here. It's kind of this no man's land along the border. And so he goes to that area to stay out of the way. And it's from there, in preparation, that he then journeys, as we're going to see, down to Jerusalem. So he gets out of the neighborhood. Things are hot. He's got to get out. Now, we go all the way back to just following the transfiguration. To Jesus is up here in Galilee. He tells his disciples 3 times, I'm going to die. And they don't get it. But that's where the author says, of the gospel says, but Jesus set his face, like one of the old translations, set his face like flint towards Jerusalem. With steely resolve, with hard determination. He knows what's going to happen, and he sets his face, he's going to Jerusalem no matter what. But even in the face of that determination, that focus that he has, he doesn't lose the focus on the other ministry that needs to be taken place. He faces opposition the whole way through. He just wants to walk through Samaria, and they're like, no, get out of here, we don't want you. He's rejected by the Samaritans. He comes over here, he winds up in Jericho, the cursed city. And yet even there he heals blind men and he saves Zacchaeus. And then he hears about Lazarus, this man that he loved, this dear friend of his. He doesn't lose the focus of the broader ministry that he's doing, in spite of the fact that he knows what's coming. So he hangs on with that steely determination that he's gonna do what God wants him to do. Nothing's gonna distract him from it. He's not gonna lose that focus. But even with that focus, he still continues the ministry that he's called to. Because look at the opposition he's facing. He's rejected by the Samaritans. Now the Jews are threatening to kill him. People see him do this miracle and they don't believe. I gotta get Kenny a new watch. Oh, wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Is that the right time?
No, it's not switched yet.
So I've got an hour over. Oh, can't fall back on that one. Let me wind up then. Which serves, ties back when I'm looking at all of this, ties back to how often Paul, in his prayers for believers, what does he pray for them? Endurance, steadfast determination, resolve that will not be dissuaded, that he is going to do what God has called him to do in the time frame that God has set. Whatever, when there's 12 hours to the day, there's 12 hours a day like to get the work done. I'm going to do the work God called me to do in the time he's given me to do it. And he doesn't lose that. And it follows on. The miracle is performed. Not everybody believes, as unbelievable as that is. And yet, how hard are our hearts is the question. All right, let's wind up. Father, we praise you for the fact that you do works to bring maximum glory and honor to yourself. Everything you do is done to your honor and glory. And Father, may that be our goal. And may we have that steadfast resolve and endurance, and yet not lose sight of the work that you've called us to do in the place you have put us and the tasks set before us. And may we do it to your honor and glory. And Father, we pray for the worship service that's ahead, that it will be pleasing in your sight. So we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.